So, welcome back, everybody. Let's enjoy now the construction of the damn head with Enrico Zini. Give him an applause.
Hello, I'm Enrico Zini, and I'm going to talk about Debian Account Managers and related responsibilities and related problems. Who of you has never heard of Debian Account Managers? Who of you has really never heard of Debian Account Managers? Okay, so for those of you who pretend to haven't, anyway, I'm part of the team of people that has responsibility for membership in Debian. So we decide who is an official member and who is not an official member, and that's what the job is. I'm in a team with these people, of which Jonathan Wilshire and Nicolas Dandrimont are in the room, in the house, I think. Yes, great. I'm skipping a bit. And we are responsible for approving account creation. So when people join Debian, we agree or disagree that people should be part of Debian. Close accounts of people missing in action. Sometimes people stop answering for years, and we close their accounts. Occasionally, we need to terminate an account in a hurry because something bad is happening. We handle developers that are not decide to take a step back and not be active anymore, and it's called emeritus. And we do all this with the help from front desk and missing in action teams, of which we also have people in the room. Stand up, big applause if you want. So this is kind of mostly paperwork, which is great. It's good if I put it, what we are not is a mediation team, community management, moderators for IRC or mailing lists. We are not responsible for deciding the vision of strategic choices of the future of the community of Debian, and we are not last resort problem solvers. But we end up with unexpected responsibilities that are pretty much emergency mediation, emergency enforcement of diversity statement and code of conduct, emergency moderation, emergency decision about what is acceptable in Debian, and emergency resolution of community problems that need urgent solutions, like somebody is having a fight right now, and people call us to say, stop! And I'm not happy. Wait. Because over time, the community has grown larger and more complex, and the online environment around it has grown larger and more complex. It used to, there was a time where when we were all just technical people doing technical things and agreeing easily on technical solutions. Well, the biggest flame war we had was kind of editor is best. Yeah, that's modern stuff. There was only one init system. And so managing a community became more complicated. And Debian has never grown the structure to do it. And since we are responsible for membership, if somebody is really misbehaving in Debian and causing a lot of trouble, then that's emergency account termination. But there's this situation where things escalated to a point where somebody becomes too much and people ask us to take action, but yeah, nothing has happened before that point. So it would be good to take some action first. And so DAM warnings have been introduced where we can tell people, hey, this is starting to get a problem. Your behavior is, as it is, it's becoming unacceptable for the community. They're a new thing, well, new as in Debian new, which is what, 5 years, 4 years? And as DAM, we don't take action for single instances. We tend to focus on long-term patterns of behavior. There are been individual, we have acted on very specific huge cases, but otherwise we tend to intervene when somebody just isn't listening, isn't acknowledging situations. We're not set out to fix people. We are happy if people acknowledge that there is a problem, and then it's just a technical implementation for them to fix it. But generally, the biggest challenge is to get someone to acknowledge that there is a problem. Although it's also not easy to get people to acknowledge that there is a problem when things are escalated. Obviously, everybody else is the problem. So it's complicated things that us paper fillers and double checkers end up doing. And to me, I got to a point where I look at DAM warnings as potential signals that we as DAM ended up picking up the ball that everybody else in Debian dropped. A warning means that we didn't get to a last resort situation yet, meaning that it probably shouldn't be a DAM dealing with the situation at this point, but the community should engage, trying to heal, fix, reason. And if people don't listen to reason and after everybody's engaged, probably you don't need a DAM warning anymore. So in theory, everyone in the project can write to a person, do you realize there's an issue here? Can you do something to stop it? And give them a chance to reflect. And people in Debian shouldn't have to endure powerless as list discussions drag indefinitely with people who are not happy with the consensus that is building, just keep beating the dead horse or escalating in violence or taking their frustration to the project. But yeah, since in Debian we do not have list moderation in terms of facilitation, people responsible for saying this thread is kind of concluded, we reached a consensus, stop beating the dead horse. That post was way out of line, take a step back. You are repeating your point, that is enough, that sort of thing that would help giving people the feedback that they are getting heated, they are getting carried away. We rarely give people temporary bans from mailing lists, like somebody gets carried away, is not listening, one can tell them, hey, you're out of this list for a week, cool down, and then come back. And it's not the end of the world if anything like that happens. It's a feedback that helps feeding that when somebody is out of line, there's consequences, but consequences, it's mostly a feedback rather than a punishment. But we rarely do things like that. Also, with the addition of dumb warnings, we end up taking responsibility for taking actions for things that shouldn't be our responsibility and work on a higher level of controversy. And that undermines our legitimacy. So I have an example that, say, in front of my house, there is a big pothole on the street. And every time I get out, I damage my car, or so just need to drive around it. And I always ask the city council to do something, but the city council doesn't do anything. So one day I just go and fill the pothole with something, gravel or whatever, and I improve the situation. But then the neighbors say, hey, who fixed that thing? That's just a crappy fix. That was not professional. And some may appreciate the gesture. Some may say that I'm fixing something that it should be the city council. And then there's more pothole on the street, and some people start expecting me to go and fill them with gravel, and some people start getting angry. Why do you keep putting gravel on the street? You're not able to do that job, stop doing it. And this just escalates. And at the core of it is that the pothole was not getting filled, and I took over a responsibility that wasn't mine, and I'm doing a job that is not mine. And dumb warnings being this kind of thing that is supposed to push for a change of direction are a bit in that field. Also, when we do take these kind of decisions, they tend to be a decision of what is appropriate or not. So suddenly we get a responsibility for taking strategic decisions about what we want our community to look like. And because we don't have anyone in Debian who's entitled to decide and explain what a healthy community looks like, we don't have anyone whose job and responsibility is curation of the community, like moderating the people that make cooperation harder, encouraging people that make cooperation better, proposing better guidelines, pointing out patterns that need to change because they're not sustainable, these kind of things. This is the thing that takes a community from barely working and makes it fun to be in, or useful or productive. We don't have something like that, so in cases of emergency, the ball stops with us and we tend to do it. And then we also have the responsibility to interpret, explain why that thing wasn't appropriate and so on, which is like social sciences, not account creation, not programming. So for example, since there is not consensus in the project about what bullying looks like, but then somebody is clearly being a bully, then we're like, hey, stop being a bully. And they say, but I'm not being a bully. And what do you mean with bullying? And suddenly we end up like defining the concept of bullying as instantiated in the general context of Debian in a social environment of asynchronous communication, mostly mediated by mailing lists. No, we are supposed to open and close accounts. I didn't sign up for that. In theory, we have sets of rules in Debian. Which we have one diversity statement and 3 code of conducts. In practice, having some rules, some code of conduct, does not encode common sense. It's really hard to make algorithmic rules on good behavior because humans are complicated, communication is complicated. No matter how hard you try, one will find a way to cheat or abuse the rule that you write, if only the rule is speaking. The rules are guidelines, but they're only as good as how reasonably and how well they are applied. So, for example, there can be a situation where somebody is saying, you faggot, shut up. And the rule says you should be decent. So one can say, that was out of line, stop it. There could be a situation where someone says, I don't understand why people bring their sexual preferences into Debian. I mean, something like very polite, but kind of specifically pushing buttons, like we shouldn't have discussions about whether to put rainbow colors for Pride Month because we only need to whatever, and just block the discussion and say that discussing this kind of thing is irrelevant and so on. And then they can do it very politely, but in a way that denies very strongly the concerns of the people that are trying to figure out these kind of things. And they can do it repeatedly in a way that pushes buttons very politely. So maybe somebody who really cares about these things will yell in the mailing list and say, you homophobe, stop fucking with our discussions. And then we tell them that was way out of line. But the two cases are not exactly the same. Or replace sexual preferences with anything about minority or something like that. We had these kind of things, this kind of discussions 20 years ago with women in Debian. We're having them now with trans people in Debian. And there's the same pattern of denying the issue, denying the existence of the person, and then people get heated because they are being denied. You can't encode privilege, oppression, history into a code of conduct that well. Or you tell somebody they stepped out of line, they may say, no, you are harassing me by always telling me that I'm out of line while I'm just discussing normally. You should stop being violent to me. Okay? And then you end up like deconstructing, that's called DARVO, by the way, which is denial, attack, reverse, victim, and offender. But if you encode against this, then one can raise issues like I'm worried that the project discriminates against fascists that are people and therefore should have the same dignity. And then people are saying, hey, no, that's intolerant people. They don't belong in a community that is supposed to have diversity. And then one can accuse of DARVO because the first who complains wins. And that's called concern trolling. So there's everything you try to encode can be flipped or abused in some way. And in the end, the rule doesn't enforce itself. You need to have somebody that steps up and says, look, I'm responsible for taking these kind of choices. That someone can be a group or whatever. And now you stop this and apply the common sense. Even in jurisdiction, in legal things, you have judges that are supposed to interpret the law rather than apply to the letter, because you need to see context, history, and so on. We say assume good intentions. But when somebody doesn't have good intentions, if you are forced to assume good intentions, you are enabling abuse. Somebody keeps invading my personal space, I can assume good intentions, but then at some point I will say, hey, can you stand a bit aside? And they won't do it. And I will say, okay, please step back, and they don't do it. And they kind of invade like with some form of aggression. And at some point I say, hey, I told you many times that now you just stay back. Oh, but you need to assume common sense. Well, somebody that comes and invalidates the fact that I'm being invaded by saying you need to assume common sense, poor person, he wasn't realizing the distance, although I was telling all the time, that person is enabling harassment, is making harassment easier or allowing it to continue. We get a lot of rule lawyering. I mean, we are clever people. We enjoy rule lawyering. Every time I hear a rule, I imagine all the ways of breaking it. It's fun, but then I don't do it. There's also another term that has been invented within Debian, which is figure skating. Like, there's something which is banned or clearly not acceptable here, and then I'm like dancing around it, but never quite putting a foot into it. So one can never say you step out of the line, but somebody's been dancing on the bloody line for years. And apparently, you know, according to the rules, we can't do anything. But meanwhile, we all suffer because, again, we would have general resolutions to empower all the developers to say this is out of line. But seriously, I don't think we want to do general resolutions about people's behavior. We don't want a community to vote about whether someone is good enough. So there needs to be something else. I'm not proposing what I'm saying, that this is a problem space which in Debian does not have people responsible for it. There is the community team that can give suggestions about interpretation, they can give guidance, but they don't have responsibility. Community team can ask a list master to ban someone for a week from a mailing list, but just as anybody else can do. And all this went on and on in Debian for so long that I start seeing like emerging problems out of this. So for example, you can denial of service discussions in Debian. Think of a topic and think about sending a mail to Debian project about it. Some topics makes you instinctively shiver at the thought of starting a thread. Say, gender, minority groups, affirmative action, inclusion, anything about the community team itself, anything about the code of conduct, systemd, user merge, dump warnings, expulsions, and you can probably come up with more examples. Who wants to start a thread about systemd on Debian Devel? Banned. It was not a project decision, but that topic is banned. This is unfortunately an effective way of governance. Whenever there is a topic for which you want the status quo to be preserved and you don't want further discussion that may destabilize the status quo, you just get in the way aggressively. You burn people's energy and it won't happen. It works perfectly. Unfortunately, we have a number of people that regularly abuse this, especially on specific topic, and it's always the same people. And it could be intentional, or it could not. It may not be intentional. It may be a genuine discomfort at the topic. But this manipulates effectively decision-making in the project. Also, it does at a much less energy level than, say, having a GR. And unfortunately, we are currently cut out of discussing very important issues, including what I'm talking about today. Like, I can give a talk here. If I had started this kind of discussion on a Debian mailing list, it would be 3 months mega thread of doom, probably. Hopefully not. But at the moment, we would have no way of preventing it. And this is very, very grave, very, very bad. It's a chilling prospect. I have no suggestions for how to solve this. I want to foreground it in the problem space. We do have a community team. It's a small group of people with the same entitlement as the rest of the Debian developers. And again, it becomes a problem of if we decide to give more power to the community team, it is again turning social issues into somebody else's problem. We go from turning all Debian social issues into DAM's problems to turning all of them into the community team's problems. I would be very much in favor of doing that just because I'm dumb, but it's not fixable that way because social community issues need to be issues of the whole community. Also, because of history, the community team has been bullied seriously for years. Whenever the community team made some public post about what has been discussed or done, whenever there has been discussions about the role of the community team, we've had violent messages destroying the threads in all sorts of ways, and the community team itself has become almost an undiscussable element of the project. And we need to recover the community team from bullying because I do believe it is an important team in Debian. So, why don't DAM solve this? Well, because as I was saying, we are not the emergency catch-all. Also, our responsibility is only about membership. When the only enforcement you have is nuclear escalation, there is nothing you can do until it's too late. And meanwhile, lots of people suffer. And I swear I wrote this before Russia invaded Ukraine. So we just don't have the tools. We have tools of last resort that can only be used for last resort. Use them too early, it's overreacting. But then if there's no action, then it's always too early. It's like, why now? Why? And also, there are issues in Debian on IRC, on public mailing lists, on the backtracking system, where the people that need feedback on issues with their behavior are not even Debian members, and they are completely outside the jurisdiction of DAM. We can't act on the membership of somebody who's not a member. So, but if somebody who's not a Debian member gets out of line, we do have someone to say, hey, wait, hang on a minute. You know, all that I said before.
You can punish them by making them members.
And then removing their account. Then, how about the DPL? Who has nothing to do, so could just pick up this as well, right? And again, that would be an emergency catch-all. I think we should stop creating a someone else to whom we assign the problems so they're not ours anymore. Also, when you concentrate all responsibility on social issues on a single point, it creates a scapegoat. You can blame people for any you can blame that scapegoat for any conduct issue. Currently at DAM, if we don't take action, people get angry. If we do take action, people get angry. Also, when these kind of decisions are taken by a small group with no turnover, the group is identified with the people. So when you decide to terminate somebody's membership, or when you decide like action on a person, when you decide that a person should have consequences for their behavior, let's say, you may make a new enemy, because it's not a team that takes that decision. It's Enrico that takes that decision. And you can make enemies for life. And then you become a target of harassment, retaliation, people with an axe to grind that will jump at your throat anytime they have a chance in any sort of discussion. We have several cases of that, one particularly special. And whenever you invoke a central team, any action is an overreaction, especially because we seldom have situations in Debian when there is a glaring misbehavior, when somebody clearly should go. It happened a few times, but it's really rare. But what happens every day is the microaggression, is the dismissing somebody's worry, is the using a slur, that sort of things, for which it's too small a thing to become the concern of a centralized team, but on the other hand, it is something that, when repeated, really hurts people. So it is something that needs to be addressed somewhat. And here's another example. If somebody is being annoying at the pub, you don't call the police. You tell them, hey, stop being annoying. If they beat you up in response, you call the police. But the you're being annoying is the bit that we lack. And things, yeah?
Unfortunately, as a community, if somebody is being annoying, we get up and walk out of the room. We are denied the space we were in.
Yeah.
Because we cannot always stand up. The consequence of if somebody is being annoying and I intervene and I say, look, you're being a cock, please step back, I don't really want my face to be hit. I really don't want the violence, which may be the next step. I completely agree with what you're saying. We don't have in the wider world. We don't necessarily have that. If I stand up and be countered, will I be backed up by everybody else in the room? It's not always there.
Yeah. Also, as a community, we don't have the technical tools to say, you're annoying, you're being annoying, stop something. We can't put thumbs up for the things we like, or emojis with eyes to the ceiling for someone that again is being heavy. So you can nitpick stupid detail with smart-looking tranchant one-liners or confrontational put-downs, and your email has exactly the same, looks exactly the same in everybody's mail client than the email of somebody that was trying to get something useful done. If people have contributed to the Grow Your Ideas repository on Salsa, where discussions happen on the Salsa issue tracker, where there are emojis, there you can see a difference. You can see when somebody made a comment that is generally considered useful and somebody made a comment that nobody read or somebody read and then regretted. I'm not suggesting replacing the Debian mailing list with Salsa issue trackers, although who wants to start a mail about that in Debian project? But it's an important tool that we don't have. And the lack of moderation and enforcement makes our community ideal for easy baiting, concern trolling, dog whistling, which is when you say something, putting in a word that humiliates people, but most people don't know it does. Like social justice warrior or something. We've had so many of these things, and people who are not part of a discriminated minority don't even notice, but if you are part of that discriminated minority, that was clearly somebody trying to push your buttons and trying to get you to leave the room. And one gets away with this and can have a lot of fun. We have at least one person on Debian project that shows up only when anything about gender is discussed. And otherwise it goes away. But if gender is discussed, they show up and get in the way. It's like their only role in Debian. But they're still there. If you're fragile in Debian, people can play cat and mouse with you. And it may be social awkwardness, people taking themselves too seriously. It may become bullying. People may not even noticing because they don't get feedback. So it's not necessarily malice, it's just lack of feedback. And then this keeps going on and on and on, and then it gets on Dam's thing, and then we're like, ah. And then people are like, well, why did nobody say it was out of the line? Yeah. So if only one group is responsible, nobody else is, and that needs changing. How do you empower developers? The police doesn't make a community safe, the community makes the community safe. If the community doesn't make the community safe, the police sometimes even makes it more unsafe. Debian developers, they have no power to act besides complaining to DAM. You could act directly, but currently nobody has your back if you become a target of the bullying. Like you can go to the bully and say, hey, stop bullying. And the bully decides that you are fun to bully too, and nobody has your back. It's not the problem of the bully. The problem is that nobody has your back. From no power comes no responsibility. And honestly, I shouldered this responsibility for far too long. I, or we as DAM, I mean, because yeah, nobody else was doing it. It is difficult stuff. It costs energy. It is engaging in conflict because you need to tell a person that what they're doing could be improved. But yeah, you don't get not to care just because there's a small number of people who's caring for you. I think I repeated that point a bit too often. So what needs to happen? I would like to distinguish DAM decisions from decisions that are more about vision and direction. And those decisions about vision and direction require more representation than a group of few people that are supposed to do bureaucracy. DAM wording shouldn't belong in DAM. There should be something with a bit who's responsible for the community vision that can tell people that is out of line, change your behavior. If you continue with this behavior, Debian is not the community for you. We need to figure out who's responsible for the interpretation and of the code of conduct, and who's responsible for applying the code, for making sure the code of conduct is not just a set of rules on a website. Deciding what to do about controversial people shouldn't belong in DAM. Curation of the community shouldn't belong in DAM. Decisions about what makes Debian a community worth being in shouldn't belong in DAM. But definitely this kind of decision should be taken. And yeah, we can't do this with GR. I'm dropping here a problem. I'm not dropping here a solution. Sorry about that. But these are things that need to be discussed because the status quo doesn't work. Yeah, Debian is not, could be a much better place to be. But we need to adult up a bit more and start taking care of these kind of issues. And that was my point for the day.
Thanks a lot, Enrico, for your talk and for all your efforts with the rest of the members. And have got questions?
Hello. So I don't really know if it's already there in the Debian project, but one thing that usually happens for people for whom English is not their first language is the ability to communicate properly over email or mailing lists. So what I have noticed is that whatever we try to translate or things that into English becomes a bit offensive for some of the people, or not really offensive, like misunderstanding, I guess. So, and usually was the solution that we used to have when we were undergrads and other things was having some sort of a physical, meetings regarding what is actually going to happen. So if we could have something like a Jitsi meet between the person who actually started the chain and maybe someone who's really, really against that particular idea, and maybe someone neutrally, like just to monitor that it doesn't blow up. And if we have those sorts of things before warnings to make sure that, okay, this person has his own ideas and this person also has their own ideas and stuff, and let them discuss face to face to know if it's really the misunderstanding that's happening over the communication, or is it actual ideologies that we have missing. I don't know, it could be helpful, but I don't really know how this can be included in Debian. That's my thing.
Yeah, I mean, thankfully we have Jitsi, Debian Social, and sometimes it's really helpful to say, hey, we're not understanding each other about setting up a call, and it's great. There may be situations in which the conflict is bigger than that, so at that point, a mediator helps to make sure that people don't talk past each other. And for that, we lack, I think, the know-how or the people willing to put in the work, because that's kind of work that takes a lot of emotional energy. We could even consider figure out if we can pay mediators to help people who are really just getting into a confrontational, like locking horns on a topic to see who's right. Like to try to engage and de-escalate and, get them both heard and synthesize something. There are a lot of people who are able to do that. I don't know about in a technical community, but it's given the scale of choices that we sometimes have to make, it could be really useful. But we are not currently equipped for it. It would be good to.
So you suggest you want to have things taken away from your table, and in a way I'm in support of that idea for a somewhat theoretical reason. In societies we've developed the habit of division of power. So in my understanding, you in a way just execute something like create an account, remove an account, and it looks like you are also the person who makes the decision. And for me, this feels a bit wrong. So if another institution, group, whatever, says this account is to be removed, I think it would look a bit better.
Absolutely. And especially, it has never been decided that DAM is responsible for that level of decision. So it's like we didn't really ask for it, but we ended up doing it because we don't have that, and so it falls here because it can't fall anywhere else. Sometimes decisions are to be taken. But yeah, I'm here to say it is a problem. And until we solve it, it may be that the best thing that can happen in Debian is that DAM takes those decisions when it's better to take them than not to. So yeah, it sucks. Let's fix it.
Okay. And actually another point, hope we have the time for this. So like I'd really like you separate between, there is a line between people who intentionally do malice and other who accidentally trigger something. And the line isn't always clear. So like for me, there was an incident last November or so. I'm not going into details here, but for like a week, I was afraid possibly I might get such a warning, just because I didn't know there was on some mailing list a discussion. Somebody referred to another IRC channel, completely unrelated, and it triggered me to do a grim joke. Not everybody took that well. And so possibly we should find a way, as it was suggested before, not start with a warning, but perhaps with something like, can we sit together, discuss this, perhaps bring somebody who would support you, like in a way a lawyer in court. Perhaps we can find something like that.
Well, we all have bad days. And like 20 years ago, I got banned from the BTS for a while, and my username was listed in an array called fuckheads. Because I got angry with someone and we didn't agree on the severity of something, and I engaged in, what you shouldn't do. But then, that was good feedback, and I was like, okay, I shouldn't have done that, and I course corrected. And so it's like in year 1700, Cesare Beccaria in Italy wrote a book on crimes and punishments, And one of the points was that you don't need big punishments. You need small things, but certain, like, because you don't want to ruin a person that did something bad. You want them to understand that actions have consequences and course correct on the actions when the actions are not acceptable. But I certainly don't want to kick out of Debian everybody who makes a mistake, because we all make mistakes, and it's totally okay to make mistakes as long as you can acknowledge the mistake and then, you know, just accept that it was a mistake. Then, fine, you'll do better next time, or you can figure out how to do better or you can say, sorry, I can't not make a mistake in this case. Can somebody else do it? I don't know. There's ways of processing once it becomes processable, but it needs to start with that level of feedback. I don't mind if you kick me out of a mailing list for a week, but I'll have some time to reflect on what I did. Cool. We grow up. We don't have that. It just gets to damn stage at some point. It's too late. It doesn't help. And at that point, you need to choose whether to keep something unacceptable in the project or kick out a person that would otherwise have been a valuable member of the community, but has never been helped becoming that. So, yeah.
Thank you, everybody. And get ready for the cheese and wine party at 8.